Our last question for the day comes from Rodell himself, Rodell Gonzalez at The Real RDG Fit. Roddy asks, what do you guys do when a client hits a plateau on weight loss? Is it an issue of refeeds, diet breaks? What if you notice that those things aren't working? So let's say you're taking someone down in a diet and their weight just isn't moving anymore, even though you've continued to push the calories in down and the calories out up, or you've kept the calories out the same, stable. First thing I do is I go with the most effective tool in health, fitness, fat loss, weight loss, whatever you want to call it. And that's shame. You start with shame. You're fucking this up and you are making me bad. You're making me look bad by doing it. So if you start with shame, you can really only tone it down from there. Coming in with the shame lets them know that you're not playing around. What do you guys like to use?
That's not, I mean, I know that was totally, well, it was serious.
Paul, are you going to agree with me? Don't agree with me. Please don't agree with me.
Answer. No, I mean, I think one of the first things that you should do as a coach is make sure that they're not fucking something up. Right. Okay. And as annoying as it may be, I mean, whether that's having a conversation about simple mistakes that a lot of people make, or checking their food log for them, or just giving them a meal plan to try and make it as idiot proof as possible. Because that's happened to me before, where I'm just like, man, this person is not losing weight. Like, let's just try this meal plan. Boom. All of a sudden it works. You have no problem losing fat. Something was going wrong. Something you were doing. It was user error. But I don't want to steal this too much. I'll let somebody else talk. I feel like because we like our definitions around here. We need to define things before we can have a conversation about them, right? So how do you guys define a plateau? How long is the duration there? Weight has been stuck for blank days / weeks.
I'd say at least 3 weeks.
Okay.
I think honestly,
you're not in a fucking plateau if you don't lose weight over a week.
Yeah. I think that's a really good frame of time, because it's just a lot of times within our job, you don't always have 3 weeks to wait. So you might kind of call something a plateau a little prematurely. But yeah, I would agree with Dom. I would not call anything less than about 3 weeks a true plateau, or you just don't know.
And I think if it's for a lifestyle client, even though
you have all the time.
Yeah, you have all the time in the world. And on top of that, like, even though weight loss isn't happening, with a lifestyle client, weight loss isn't the only goal. There are a lot of other metrics that you can refocus a client on outside of the scale, which may actually have better long-term consequences or long-term effects than just focusing on that scale. Are we improving your health markers? Are we getting you into better habits? Are we reinforcing your you looking at performance metrics in the gym? Are you getting stronger? Do you feel like you have better energy throughout the day? Sleep. I just had this conversation with a client today. She was very stuck on the scale, and I just asked her a series of questions. Is your sleep getting better? Do you feel better in the gym? And it was just like, yes, 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 yes. And it was like, then how could we be plateaued if our goal is to improve your health? If our goal is to improve your health and we're checking 9 out of 10 boxes, then we're getting there. I talked to somebody
about this the other day too. And I said, just because you're not losing weight doesn't mean you're not losing fat.
Yep.
No.
You know, there's so many things that go into like your weight, your morning weight.
Yeah.
Like maybe we were around Thanksgiving, maybe you were sleeping less because you had events, or you had, you know, there's so many different things. So I had to remind her that, you know, just because you're not losing weight doesn't mean you're not losing fat. And then she was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because even when I look at my pictures, we could see a difference in them. And, you know, and then, you know, she went from being extremely constipated to not anymore. So there's so many different things that I was like, these are all variables that play into your weight every day.
Dude, I'm gonna completely shut up after this one, Paul. I promise. I'll shut up after this.
Motherfucker.
I know, right? I think that there is an article that everyone who has lifestyle weight loss as their goal, or lifestyle fat loss as their goal, needs to read, and it's called "Of Whooshes and Squishy Fat: by Lyle McDonald. I can't tell you how many times I have sent this exact article to individuals, but it explains the fat loss whoosh and why you might see a plateaued scale weight for weeks at a time, and then all of a sudden it just like falls off a cliff. So we can actually throw that article in the show notes below so that everyone can read it, because it's one of those ones that I reference back to almost weekly.
Yeah. So no, that is a really good article, and something that I need to start recommending to a lot of clients too. But I thought you guys were going in a different direction. You guys went in the health direction, but that's why I always have people collect circumference measurements now. And I've grown to love those so much, man, because they can tell such a different story than the fucking scale. And, yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll see people's weight plateau, but it's like your waist circumference is smaller, or maybe limbs measure slightly bigger or are maintaining their size, while waist is getting smaller. And then you ask some follow-up questions. You're like, well, do you feel like you look different? Like, do your fit clothes different? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we didn't like mismeasure. And it's like, things are going well. I'm not going to adjust your food yet. Right.
Yeah. I think you guys have all made pretty good points. Like really good points, because that's the big thing's going to be whether or not it's a lifestyle client or if it's a physique competitor. I usually almost try to bake in a potential quote unquote plateau inside of a contest prep and just go, hey, let's give ourselves another month so we can be ready early, because there's a good chance that it's going to happen. Often fat loss isn't necessarily linear for a lot of people. So try to bake that stuff in. But yeah, with lifestyle clientele, try to get them off of that scale as being their primary indicator of progress. So ask them all those questions. Like Ryan said, do you feel good? What does your day look like? Are you sleeping better? Or even things like sex drive, stuff like that, or all the things. I mean, I'm not trying to go too deep into that conversation, but those are the things you can kind of bring up to see if they're actually making progress, and then kind of get them away from using the scale as their only indicator of progress. And then also like Paul was saying, first, like assess like what's going on. Often a plateau isn't really a plateau. It's that they've stepped outside of the plan at some point in time. They've done something that's going to be weird. I've tried a ton of that stuff, refeeds, diet breaks, and sometimes it's the person is just not tracking the way that they should, or they're like, oh, that's right. Every weekend I've been going bowling. I've been eating 2 hot dogs, but I've been tracking it. You're like, what? Like, wait a minute. Like, what kind of hot dogs? Well, I don't know. I just pick hot dogs from MyFitnessPal. And you're like, oh, so that's the thing. And people don't realize how small of an increase in caloric intake could possibly take them out of being in a caloric deficit. So if you kind of explain to them like, hey, it might not seem like it's a big deal, but it very well might be a big deal if that's the thing.
Yeah.
But or they underestimate the caloric value of what they're eating. You know what I mean? Because it's true. Like if using a 50 calorie condiment one day takes you out of a deficit, then you're not in much of a deficit to begin with. And like, you should be able to do that and still continue to lose weight, but people, like you said, they pick this hot dog that's 180 calories and they think that's what they're eating. But in actuality, they're eating like a 400 calorie hot dog, and they're having 2 of them, on that Friday night.
Yeah. Like I always tell people, your deficit isn't a daily thing. It's a weekly thing. Because like people will really eat off plan and they think, well, I was so perfect. Why didn't I lose any weight? And I'm like, well, you ate enough to take you out of a deficit this week. Like you probably ate enough to potentially put some fat back on. Because I hate the whole 500 calorie thing to lose a pound. I know it's really standard. Like it's just, what you kind of learn on the basis of, the base of everything. But to say 3,500 calories is what it takes to add a pound of fat back, that's such like a hard quantitative number that I think people put too much like trust in. It's because they think if they didn't eat 3,500 calories over their maintenance, they didn't gain any fat back.
Yeah, I think Lyle has an article about that, sort of not necessarily debunking that, but just saying like, yeah, it is it is good because people like to hear numbers, especially when you're considered sort of a specialist in your field. They like to hear you sound like there's some very concrete information that you can give them that will allow them to make progress. So 3,500 calories or 500 calories a day, that sounds really good on its face. But, we're an adaptive species. There's a lot of things going on that are going to definitely interfere with that potential of 500 calories exactly being the thing that's going to allow you to either make progress or not making progress.
So I'm going to push back there because I think the 3,500 number, I think that is a solid number. And it's like, that's the number that you want to shoot for. Where I think people get lost, or where I think people kind of get a little bit jaded, is in like, how do we get to that 3,500 number, and how much goes into that daily deficit, where it's like what Paul said, like a little bit of extra like sauce here or there might be, 50, 100 calories. Your step count is, 1,500 to 2,000 less on a couple days of the week. And you've really kind of slowly but surely, with like tiny little steps in your day, eaten away at that deficit. And what on paper was 3,500 calories ends up being, 1,500 to 2,000. So you think that you are in that deficit, but in reality, it's significantly less. And I think a conversation that I often have with my lifestyle clients who aren't on a concrete timeline is like, that's fine. I was like, that's not a big deal. Like, remember that your goal was to lose weight, to lose body fat. Like 0.5 pounds in a week of body fat is still a success. It's still closer to our goal number, to your goal number that you were at. Like, you're going to have weeks where you absolutely knock it out of the park and you lose 1.2, 1.5. And then you're going to have weeks where, shit comes up at work and it's someone's birthday and, you get stuck with a work deadline. Your steps aren't great that week. Your training isn't awesome. 0.5 is not a step back. It's still a step forward. It's just a smaller step forward than you had originally planned. But you cannot go broke making a profit. And that's still a profit at the end of the day.
I think one thing that the 3,500 rule kind of plays a weird part for me is you don't, a lot of people don't take into consideration that if you reduce food, you're reducing other parts of your energy expenditure outside of direct food. Like your thermal effect of food goes down because you're not eating as much food. Your NEAT possibly could go down because you're not having as much calories. So your 3,500 calorie deficit you think you're eating on the surface is actually probably closer to like 2,000 because of that energy demand shift. I think that's where I think, better coaches, more knowledgeable people can piece that together and really show a client why. Yeah, you might think you're eating at a 500 calorie deficit a day, but this is why you're not losing at that rate.
I mean, we know the metabolic adaptation happens, and, part of that is from the weight loss. And you can even maintain your step count, and still you don't burn as many calories throughout a day. I mean, because step count is only one part of the amount of moving you do throughout a day, right? Like, you're doing a lot of other things. So,
and if you're losing weight.
Well, if you're losing weight, your steps don't burn as many calories.
Yeah,
Boom.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything.
So I think
that's why Steve Hall wears a weight vest as he loses weight.
Yeah. And I think
Steve Hall,
so. The
very gifted bodybuilder. We let Steve very gifted,
absolutely
ascending towards legend status as we speak.
But here's the thing. One thing I like to take into consideration when I create or I start giving out those hard numbers. And there was a time where I did it all the time, but what will happen is if you start to explain too much about energy balance, what will happen is if somebody says, okay, so I have to eat a net of 3,500 calories less per week, they'll start doing weird stuff like, I'm going to undereat 3 days in a row, and then I'm going to overeat on the weekend. And then they've created their own sort of weird low day, high day situation that's basically uncontrolled by you or them because they're just going to overeat. So it can be sort of a strange line to kind of balance. And, for the coaches out there, you're going to have to look at the personality of the person that you're working with. And if you discern very early on that, their relationship with food is not very good, which is often the case, that's why they reached out to you to begin with. Giving them numbers or even explaining energy balance as a whole might not necessarily allow them to fix that relationship with food because they're going to get right back into a very disordered eating pattern.
It's going to, I could not agree more. It's going to push them down that disordered route. Something One of the latest episodes of Iron Culture, Ben House and Gabby Fundaro are on Fundaro is her last name. I always pronounce that wrong. Ben was talking about, when I'm coaching clients, like, I don't want you to have my brain. I don't want you to have my knowledge, because on a daily basis, it's a burden to have what I have. I want to give you the bare minimum of what it takes for you to reach your goals, so that you're not sitting there and stressing about, let's have a low day this day, high day this day. I'll have to do more steps, more cardio to compensate for this, that, and the other, so that you just become this chronically obsessed individual that develops these eating patterns. Like, these disordered eating patterns. Why don't I just give you the basics, distill it down to the level that you need to know, and then you can just leave all the advanced stuff to nerds like us? Yeah. I thought that was a very interesting take.
I think that really is. It's a refreshing one, kind of a unique one. But I don't even, the 3,500 calorie thing is something that a lot of people talk about and a lot of people already know. And for myself, though, that's not like a big number I really use a ton. Like, a lot of times I'll do, like, somebody enters a dieting phase, right? And I remove a certain amount of food, and maybe I add a certain amount of activity. And then after I make my changes, I just sort of check. I'm like, hey, how close is this to that 3,500 calorie mark? If it's, it probably isn't a bad thing to be somewhere close to that once you total up all the calories or the entire deficit. But then from there, like, that number matters no more, really. It's just like, hey, are you losing weight or are you not? If you are, like, cool. If you're not, and we've a sufficient amount of time has gone by for us to think you're at a plateau, or other things like mentioned in this question, like a refeed or a diet break, aren't clearing up the picture a little bit, then we just got to remove food. Like, fuck the 3,500 calorie number.
Yeah. Yeah. And then precision is, like, it's relative. So 3,500, like, sure, it sounds great because it's a very concrete number, but it's, at the end of the day, like Paul said, like, just less than what you're doing now. Like, you're not losing weight. So that means we either need to increase activity or you eat less food. That's just where we need to be. So getting caught up in how do we get to 3,500 calories or 500 calories less a day? What if they've always been, I think you guys had mentioned on one of the podcasts when I was gone, like, what if they've always been tracking their food wrong? Like, you have no idea if it's actually 500 calories. Who knows? But at the end of the day, there's probably far too many variables to take into account, where just the one that you can control is just eat a little less food. That's it.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have ever, I'm sure you have, where either with yourself or a client, like, maybe, I know, like, for myself, I can get that good initial push into weight loss and fat loss just by removing, like, maybe 300 calories. I don't even have to come, a full 500 every day, so yeah, there's that.
Roddy, I hope we answered your question. No plateaus for you, man. You're looking leaner and meaner by the day, and I will see you this weekend, buddy.
Wait, we don't want to... I have some more to add to this question.
Then keep going. I was just speaking directly to Roddy. I wasn't even talking to you, Paul. Maybe you should mind your own business.
Cool. Maybe I should. No, but I do think the refeeds, diet breaks, things like that can be something really useful to test the waters, because I think we've all had those situations where we do give somebody a refeed or we do put them in a diet break and it clears up the picture. They get that swoosh that Squat Dad was talking about, and just drop some water weight, and you can kind of see that realized in the scale weight. So like, for myself, if I find myself in a predicament where it's like, it seems like we've gotten more aggressive than I'd like to, or we've tried to combat these stalls with pulling more food. First, I like to make sure that they're doing things correctly, but then it's like, hey, like, maybe we do want to try refeed, or we do want to try diet break, see if that clears up the picture some.
I can dig it. Other gentlemen, anything to add, or shall we clip it and ship it, as they say on Twitch?
They say that?
Oh, that's the thing?
I think so. Like, I hear, like, people like doing, like, nasty plays and, like, PvP and stuff, and they're like, oh, clip it and ship it. I don't know what it means, but I hear people saying it, so I can repeat it. Sound cool.
Let's use it.
Let's use it then. All right, folks. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for watching. As always, like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Head over to giftedperformance.com. We've got plenty of new apparel for you. We're running our transformation challenge starting the new year. Make sure you grab one of those spots. We are about halfway sold out there, so don't miss your opportunity at a $500 cash prize. 8 weeks of coaching with one of our one-on-one coaching specialists. Change your life and win some cash along the way. We will see you on the next one. In the meantime, in between time, as always, stay gifted. Peace. Paul, we can't finish.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.